Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Health Habits and Epic Living podcast. And I'm delighted today to have back a guest I've had on the podcast before, Dr. Melissa McCreery. She is amazing, and I wanted to bring her back on the podcast to really discuss what we were talking a little bit about before I hit record. It's stressful time for a lot of people, given what's going on in the world, giving the news, everything that we read, and we will get into that more. But before I welcome Melissa in, I just want to read a little bit about her bio. Dr. Melissa McCreery is a psychologist, emotional eating expert, author, host of the Too Much on Her Plate podcast, and the creator of Your Missing Piece, which is a program that supports smart, busy women in creating freedom from overeating and peace around food. She's helped thousands break cycles with overwhelm, overload, overeating, without this feeling of deprivation and without depending on ridiculous amounts of willpower. Sounds very similar to how I help with women with alcohol. She emphasizes leveraging your own unique strengths, ditching the diet mentality, and using the power of psychology. She has been featured on the Wall Street Journal, CNN Health, Weight Watchers magazine, Good Housekeeping, Working Mother, Fitness, Women's Health, Real Simple, and Self. And so I'm very delighted to have Melissa join us back on the podcast. Hi, Melissa.
Hey, I'm so glad to be here. I think we have good conversation, and I think this is a really important topic. Yeah.
Yeah. And given what I kind of alluded to, just this stress that a lot of people are feeling this time of year, and given the political climate and the news and the weather wonky patterns, I mean, I just feel like the world is a little heavy for some people. And I know when we do feel this stress response in our body, we can be doing things in behavior wise that maybe we're just looking to numb out or not feel or deal with the stress. And so I think your topic is hugely timely, what's going on in the state of the world today. To begin, I thought we would at least open it up to when we talk about eating. I have it in my mind how I kind of break it down into like categories. So like I think of physiologic eating, right? Like we are actually hungry, our body craves food, and part of that is hormonal, and part of that may not be hormonal because hormones can be off whack as well. And then I think of this like psychological piece where we're hungry for something, but it's not necessarily food, right? We might be hungry for stress relief. And so, I just like to broaden our topic just to get that 30,000-foot view before we dive into exactly how we're going to help and how you help people with stress eating. So, do you have it categories like that when you're thinking about eating and our response to food?
You are more linear than I am because I just think food it's complicated. It is
Okay.
complicated, and yeah, there's so many different reasons that we use food, we want food, we need food, and they overlap too, and they interact with each other. So you can have a physiological need for food, you can get too hungry, and then that could lead you to deal with your emotions differently, or your stress resilience is different, or you're not sleeping well because you're overwhelmed, and that leads to physiologic changes that, it's complicated. And I think to top that off, food is easy. And what I'm hearing from so many women these days is for a variety of reasons, they're overwhelmed, life feels uncertain, things are happening really quickly and sometimes out of left field. They don't know what to expect or what to predict. Often people are feeling ungrounded, kind of unanchored, untethered is how somebody put it the other day. And then also just overburdened, and the idea of doing one more thing it just feels like too much, right? So, oh, I should rein in my eating. It's one more thing that feels too hard. Or was talking to somebody in our group the other day, and she said, "I know I'm stress eating, but I'm stressed. Like, what else? What should I do?" I have this list of things to do, but they all seem stressful and hard, and I just don't have the energy for that. And so then I feel bad about myself, and it can become just a whole big. It can start to feel like a big tangled up, ball of yarn, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and just thinking about how much stress there is out in the world right now and times of uncertainty. I think I'll bounce this off of you. Like, how do you define stress? I can even think of like fear of the unknown or the uncertainty leads to stress in our
Mhm.
bodies. Yeah.
Or
And
or too much of something. You can have good stress too, right? Pushing
mm,
yourself, kind of that tension. But when it becomes too much to cope with, it is really easy to turn to habits that don't serve you, but they do serve you in the moment,
mm,
right? They're a
mm,
coping tool. Yeah.
mm, mhm. And I know for me, I was just went through my own stress. My mom got really sick. I put the podcast on hold. I could have probably done it all, but it would have felt like a lot, and I wanted to dedicate my time elsewhere. And then taking that time for myself before I came back and put the podcast back off of hold, right? And coming back, I think it is something we need to be aware of and how different things that come in. Like for me, my generation, the sandwich generation, we've got kids at home, we've got aging parents, and sometimes managing that stress might mean you need to pull back in certain areas to be able to compensate and be resilient, right? To find your resilience so you can restore yourself rather than turning to something like food or alcohol or some other way to get through. I know in the past, it would have been easy for me just to tell myself I needed the alcohol to get through this, or I'm just going to do this temporarily just to get through this rough patch. And I don't want to put judgment out there. Yeah, there were times that I used it, but knowing that I've overcome that now and honored my body differently through this stressful period of time felt really a lot better and more in alignment with my values. Yeah. So recognizing the stress, do you have a tool or a way that you help women look at stress and how it's affecting them? And I know you have tools to help them through that.
Well, I want to just take apart what you just said because you used some words that I think we all use, and we use them so automatically that we don't really think about them. And that you talked, we manage stress, right? We manage it. And we get through things by managing them. And most of us have become really good at managing things. And it's only when we get so far beyond our capacity that it's like, oh God, I can't deal with it anymore, right? Or it's just too much, or I feel overwhelmed. I think so often there's a step that gets skipped. So I know last time I was on the podcast, we talked about hidden hungers. And one of the hidden hungers that shows up all the time for smart, busy women, for overwhelmed women, and it's the one that gets the most overlooked. And when people go to my website and they take the free quiz, when people get this result, they're usually the most surprised by it. It's hunger for compassion. Okay. A hidden hunger for compassion shows up if you're somebody, I mean, I can't predict completely, but if you're somebody who's doing a lot of mindless eating or a lot of eating on autopilot, or if you are eating to numb yourself, and we're seeing a lot of that right now from people, I am, it's quite often related to a hidden hunger for compassion. That might not be all that's going on, but we usually need more compassion than we give ourselves. We usually give more compassion to everybody else but ourselves. And we can get so focused on managing even things like stress and overwhelm and grief and loss and really hard things. We can get so focused on managing that we forget to give ourselves compassion. So, and that leads to this cycle that can build and build and build into even more overusing of things. Because if you forget to give yourself compassion and you're so focused on getting through and managing, then you end up exhausted, right? You end up feeling like you're too busy. You end up feeling like you didn't get any me time, or you're not getting enough self care. And then on top of it, because the goal is, I just got to manage this, perfectionism comes in, right? We get really hard on ourselves. We feel guilty for what we haven't managed. And as you said so beautifully, like when you can slow it down and take care of yourself and realize, oh, yes, I have needs too. I forgot how,
Yeah.
because it's so easy to just get focused on the prize, right? We have to get to the deadline or whatever. That really causes things to fall apart. So the first piece I often, just so often, is just to acknowledge this is hard,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. And even saying that, the way you said it, it felt so compassionate. to acknowledge that this is hard. You know, because I was thinking, oh, what are those compassionate ways we can take care of ourselves? And, but just naming it, like you said, in a nice voice, not like this is hard and, kind of rushing off to do the next activity, but no, just slowing down enough and just saying, yeah, this is hard for me. Yeah.
I often have this picture of like sitting down on the porch steps with some little person that you care about, right? And what you would do if they were having a hard day and you could, maybe they had a fight with their friend or something. There's nothing you can do about it, right? But what do you do? The picture I get in my head is you put your arm around them, right? And you're like,
Mm.
I know this sucks or this is so hard or we don't tend to talk to ourselves that way, especially when we're in management mode. We tend to just like, okay, but you got to keep going. But yeah,
Yeah.
projects is still due. Like, no time to think about that now. I think it's really important if you're using food or if you're using alcohol or if you're using anything in a way you don't want to really pay attention to what are you expecting of yourself and how are you treating yourself?
Mm, mm. That's so good. I love the picture you just painted because I'm just thinking of the way I would talk to my daughter
Yeah.
she who got a low test score or had a bad day or yeah, I would just be like, yeah, that's hard, and just come at it with compassion rather than moving on to like, okay, what's the next test date or how are we going to make this get better, and trying to quote fix or
Mhm.
rush off to the next thing. Yeah, you just kind of sit there and with them in that feeling state and offer compassion.
I think one place that so many people get stuck when it comes to stress eating is because I think the advice is often really simplistic and impractical, as in just recognize that this isn't a need for food, so don't eat, or
Mm.
or even just it's overly simplistic to say, well, you just have to manage the stress and then you won't need to eat. We're smart people. We wouldn't be stress eating if the stress was an easy thing to there was an easy solution for it, right?
Right.
Soaring much of the time, there is not something you can do, at least in the moment, to reduce your stress. So much of the time, you cannot go take a bubble bath, right? Which is the other ridiculous advice. But think about when you're having a hard time or when you've done something really hard and you feel seen and acknowledged. And think about how powerful that feels. That is such an act. We dismiss it when we think of doing it for ourselves, but it is such a powerful act of self-care and self-kindness. And we completely plow through that, most of us, when we're trying to deal with stress.
Yeah. Gosh, that's so good. I'm thinking of so many examples right now in my life where when I actually acknowledge the stress in others, how it diffuses the emotion versus if I'm just trying to problem solve,
Yeah.
how it can escalate the stress and cause more
Exactly.
stress. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you get that cycle where you go and go and go all day and you feel overwhelmed and maybe you feel irritable and maybe you feel frustrated and you feel like you got no time for yourself. And at the end of the day, you just collapse with your bowl of rice
Mm.
or with whatever it is because you deserve something and you do deserve something. But even in those moments, so many people that when we start to work together, even in those moments, there's not that acknowledgement of I was really brave today, or I really struggled, or I showed up, anyway, or I'm tired. There's so often just that underlying feeling of you just got to keep going, suck it up, buttercup, right? You need to get through it.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? All of
That's
the
right. Put on your big girl pants. Let's go.
yeah. Yeah. So are you like the traditional advice around managing stress? We can, you honed in on that term managing stress. So maybe
Yeah.
we'll come back to that too. But I'm just thinking of what traditional advice I hear when it comes to managing stress. What have you found that traditional advice just doesn't seem to hit the mark or seem to work and often can maybe even escalate the stress?
Well, I think it escalates it when it is grounded in this idea that you should be able to manage the stress.
Mm,
So
mm.
often you can't. Or that may sometimes it is grounded in the idea that if you just had better tools for dealing with stress, you'd be okay. And quite often, your tools for managing stress are perfectly They're perfectly fine-tuned. It's just that you got some other stuff going on. You've got maybe some other hidden hungers. You're too exhausted. You're too busy. You're caring for parents and you've got other emotional things going on in the background and your bandwidth has been used up. It's not that you're lacking in tools. Sometimes it is that you're lacking in tools. And you can get all the advice about managing stress in the world, but if somebody doesn't tell you how to do it, you're
Yes.
repeating the same old stuff that doesn't work. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, or I remember back, in my teens and 20s reading articles about how to manage stress and it was like a bubble bath or,
Mhm.
maybe that just seems impractical or I don't want a bubble bath right now. Like that seems more stressful. It's just another thing to do on my
It's another item on your to-do list.
yes.
Exactly. That's
Hmm.
the last thing people need is to pile on more expectations. And so
Hmm.
that's why I always start with two things. One is just acknowledging how you feel in the moment without pressure to change it. Of course, you want to change it. Of course, you'd like it to be different, but like take away the job. I should be doing this. I should feel this way. How are you feeling? And what would self-kindness look like in that moment? How can you put your arm around yourself? Or how can you just acknowledge and look into your own eyes and see what's going on? That's the first step. And we talked about in the other episode, also just taking a pause. And I say just, but it's not an easy thing to do when you're all revved up. It's a helpful thing to do to take that deep breath and to just, feel your heartbeat, connect with yourself and ask what do I know about what's going on right now inside of me? What am I feeling? What do I need that I was just talking to somebody who's making afternoon trips to the vending machine for Coke every time she's stressed, right? Coca-Cola, right? And how can we just stop the automatic pilot, the trajectory there and wait a minute, other than the Coke, what else am I need? What do I need right now? What am I feeling? What led me down this path at this very moment? What's going on inside of me? And how can I be kind to myself about that? Because let's be honest, beating yourself up about it, telling yourself that list of shoulds in your head, saying, I don't need a Coke, I shouldn't have a Coke, that just adds to stress, right? You don't need more stress.
Yes. Yes. 100%. It is so difficult for us to, like, we're so good, especially as women, taking care of others, being like, often tell myself I'm like my daughter's emotional support buddy. you know, we're so good at helping others, but really when it comes down to slowing, and I love what you said, connecting with yourself, because me just talking about, even the first 10 episodes of this podcast, I talk about how alcohol is the disconnection, right? It allows us to disconnect from ourselves. And somehow we see that as a solution or that's the answer to numb or to not feel, especially if the feelings are so horrible inside of our body. But when we realize like the opposite is going to actually heal us and allow us to overcome these behaviors we don't want to do, I wonder why it's so hard for particularly maybe our generation, right? To have that level of connection with ourselves where when we're able to do it so well with others, but it just seems so foreign of a concept to do with ourselves. Any thoughts around why it's so hard for us to connect with ourselves and feel those emotions?
Well, I think sometimes the emotions are hard. We don't want to feel them. There's
Yeah.
this delayed reward out there that we know in theory it would be helpful. We live in a society where more and more and more that is focused on doing, and we skip over the step. We're so focused on doing that we forget that really the reason that we do all of these things is because of how we want to feel and how we want to be and how we want other people to feel. We get so wrapped up in doing all the time, and slowing down is hard. And in our society, slowing down is hard. I think that with stress, so much of stress is a feeling of not having enough control. Things are
Mhm.
moving too fast, or I don't know what's going to happen, and when you're doing something, it feels like you're doing something. It feels like you're
Mm.
being effective, right? So just sitting and thinking about your feelings feels I've been having a lot of conversations in my program lately about what your brain tells you is productive and what your brain says is a waste of time, right? And if you're quote unquote not doing anything, and by the way, asking yourself how you're feeling and checking in with yourself and being kind to yourself those are all doing things. But if you're not doing something in a way that your brain defines, then that unlocks a whole other Pandora's box of, well, I'm lazy, or see, I am
Yes.
undisciplined, or I'm not trying hard enough, or I'm not pushing myself hard enough, so it's a new skill set for a lot of people. And we have to recognize it's one of the reasons there's so much stress right now. We are pushed all the time to be doing 13 things at once and to be doing them well and to be doing them without feeling overwhelmed. And we're being shown pictures on social media of all these supposedly happy people who are doing these things at successfully. It's a lot.
It is a lot. It is a lot. And I'm just thinking, like, even in just the space of technology, it's a lot, right? I'm just thinking of even 10 years ago, we didn't have this number of apps. Like, I mean, to go to a concert, you have to download an app to get your ticket. I mean, what happened to just paper tickets, right? Like the amount of technology now with AI, and now everybody's got their own personal chat GPT and programming that. Like, all of this takes time and effort and brain power. And like you're saying, like adding to the level of things to do or the mind to be occupied with, that it does become almost not even within our realm to just and be still and to be with ourselves, because we are just so preoccupied with the next thing, and in that doing can feel quote unquote productive or like we're making progress. When are we really making progress if we're stressing out, burning out, our bodies can't physiologically and psychologically keep up when they're screaming to us, hey, take a break, take a pause, take a nap. Right?
And
Take some time
right,
out.
exactly. And also that being with ourselves is not in that moment pushing ourselves to be feeling different than what we are really feeling. I mean, I think on the one hand, it seems like such a silly question. And on the other hand, it is such a powerful and important question for anybody listening to ask yourself, do you give yourself permission to be tired?
Mm.
As and even the question is kind of ridiculous, as if you have a choice. You're living in a body. If you're tired, you're tired. But we act like it is a something that is controlled by will. Right? I
Mm.
shouldn't be tired. There's no reason I'm so tired. Do you give yourself permission to be tired, or do you tell yourself all the ways you have to manage your tiredness and you have to keep going? And tiredness is its own hidden hunger, right? A hidden hunger for rest.
Yes.
And it's amazing to me. And when you can step back and really look at it, how much we fight this just a basic human need that we have, and then blame ourselves for having it. I shouldn't be tired.
Yes. Yes. Actually, I'm thinking back to a client I had months ago who would say the reason she would drink is because it would give her this little bit of initial kick buzz. And
Mhm.
she's like, I can't fall asleep. I got to keep going. There's just so much to do. So if I start drinking, that first glass at least doesn't make her tired and gives her energy. And you're right. She's like escaping that feeling of like, oh, my body is getting tired. It's 8 o'clock at night or 8:30. I shouldn't be getting tired at this time of day. But actually, yeah, you are. And what's the harm in recognizing that? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And even if you do have to keep going, seeing yourself, acknowledging, I'm really tired, right? I'm really tired is different from the whole, just think about the whole self-talk that goes on once you tell yourself you shouldn't be in the state you are. You shouldn't be who you are. You shouldn't be doing what you are. You shouldn't be thinking the way you are. No wonder you go and grab something to eat to numb it out and to quiet that voice down. It's
Yes.
not pleasant. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not a pleasant voice. Yeah. Here's another one I feel a lot of people say that they're feeling, but they almost say it like a badge of honor, is that I'm busy. Things are busy. Like, it's almost like a good thing that I'm so busy. I got so much work, or I got so much to do. I'm busy. I'm busy. I'm busy. I'm popular, or I'm trusted at work. So they give me more work and that makes me more busy. And so busy is this way that I feel a lot of successful women may be communicating, that recognizing that it's a form of stress, but they look at it as like a positive spin rather than, yeah, it's okay to be busy, but there's also a time when your body does need the break and the rest. And to be busy all the time doesn't mean you're productive, successful, and happy.
And there's nothing wrong with even doing busy things that if you're doing busy, there's nothing wrong. Let me finish my sentence. There's nothing wrong with being too busy, and we can get really busy with stuff that we really love too, but it's really important to be honest with yourself about whether it is disconnecting you from yourself.
Mm,
And again, it's a very basic thing, but it will not be unusual if you ask yourself, anybody who's listening, and you don't like the answer, when's the last time you really asked yourself, what am I feeling? And that could be a cerebral question. What am I feeling? Emotionally, what am I feeling? It could be very visceral. What am I feeling in my body? What is my body feeling like? We get into managing, we get into stress and overwhelm and being too busy, and we just disconnect from ourselves.
yeah. Yeah. So transitioning to the tools or the ways to connect with yourself, or
Mhm.
the ways that are more successful in terms of really getting over the overeating or filling our hungry ghosts with food, or hidden hungers, as you call them, right? With food. What are some ways we can really connect with ourselves and fuel ourselves in a way that's may not require the food?
So I I think the first piece is deciding why you want to do that. And that may sound like I'm not answering the question, but if you're busy, if you're overwhelmed, if you do a lot of things, you are probably also really good at collecting a lot of strategies and ideas and things that you can put on your to do list of what you could do to help. And then you feel guilty because you don't do them or you don't remember them. Or, or you tried them once and then they kind of fell off your radar. So it's really important to know why would this be helpful to me? Why do I want this? That's the first thing to anchor it into. And then slow down. And by slowing down, I don't mean you have to quit your job or you have to stop caring for your children but start giving yourself little pockets. And a little pocket could be 15 seconds of
Mm,
just saying, okay, what's going on? How am I feeling? What can I control? If I'm feeling out of control and overwhelmed, what can I control in this situation? If it's helpful to take the quiz on my website and target a hidden hunger, that's great. You should go to the website. You should take the free quiz. It'll give you something to start with, but then don't make it too big. Remember the whole compassion thing and remember that you've got enough overwhelm and you have a big enough to-do list. So what would help me feel anchored if I'm feeling like I'm just spinning out? What would help me feel calmer? If I'm tired, can I give myself permission to rest? Or can I make a plan to start getting more rest? How can I address things in a little way? I don't need more overwhelm. How can I address things in a small way that at least tells myself I'm taking myself seriously. Am I saying that in a way that makes sense?
absolutely. I have some visualizations of things that I would do that just came to mind as you were talking about that.
We were talking about aging parents earlier and went through a health crisis with a family member a while ago. And what I had control of, because I had no time. My schedule had been taken away from me. All the routines that were my stress busting routines, my getting outdoors, my exercise, all that stuff was just shot to hell. So what did I have control of? Well, I figured out I had this bottle on my desk of oil that smelled really good. And I could, you know what? I thought I can rub that into my cuticles every day. Right. I can do that. It was winter and my hands were dry and I was in and out of hospitals and I was using all the hand sanitizer. Right. I could do that. It was a little, you could say silly thing, but I knew why I was doing it. I knew why I was doing it. It wasn't a thing I was making myself do. I knew I just needed, it felt like I was caring for myself. The other thing I remember doing at that time, it was winter and they had the little mandarin oranges that are in the stores, right? You know, the little Satsuma oranges. And we had a bunch of them in the refrigerator. And I decided, you know what? I'm like racing around. I'm not planning my meals. I decided for, I don't know why three. I'm going to have three of those every morning. It turned out to be the smartest thing I could do because you have to peel them and then your hands get kind of sticky. So you can't really do anything else while you're eating these oranges, right? And then they're little, but I don't know about you, but I eat them 1 or 2 sections at a time. It didn't take very long, right? Maybe 5 minutes to eat these 3 satsumas, but it slowed me down and put me in my body, and it helped me feel like I was doing something effective and kind for myself. And I can't, it sounds like such a silly thing. I cannot tell you how important it felt to have these 2 little things that I was doing every day. And that was it. I could have made you a really long list of all the stuff that wasn't getting done,
Yes.
right? And that's
Yes.
what our brains will tend to do.
Yes. Yes.
But
Yes.
also, like, wait a minute, here's how I am showing up. That's important. We need that. We all need.
Mm. Mm. That's so good. And I was just thinking of, when you're in those times, to be asking for what you need from your support circle.
Exactly.
When I was caring for my mom and I was back in Pennsylvania and I was calling, my husband and my daughter just to connect with them too. And then just telling my husband what I needed. I needed some words of affirmation being said because I didn't like being away from them. It was around Christmas time and we just really love Christmas and doing all the things. And I was kind of feeling a little remorseful that we weren't getting to do that time and celebrate that time together. And I knew that what I was doing was what I wanted to be doing and the important thing, but sometimes I just needed a little bit more affirmation at that time. But, having to pretend somebody can read my mind would not be an effective strategy, but really just asking for that. You might not expect that somebody knows what you need, but if you can just ask for it and receive a little bit, I think that's very compassionate towards yourself of saying, "Hey, I'm here, I'm doing this thing. I don't want sympathy, but I would love some words of affirmation."
And I think sometimes you have to actually take a step back and slow down enough to figure out what you need. Because
Mm.
it's so easy to get into managing overdrive. Well,
Mhm.
I'm on this path and I'm taking care of my mom, or I'm taking care of work, or whatever the thing is, I'm not thinking about myself. I'll deal with myself afterwards. We actually
Yes.
say stuff like that. And
Mm.
really, it is such a great use of your time, even if you don't know what to do about it, to think about, what do I need, right? You can ask for help by saying, I don't know how you could help with this, but here's how I'm feeling, right? Or I don't know what to do about this situation, but you can sometimes put it out there. You don't have to solve the problem to ask for help. And I see a lot of women fall into that trap too. I don't even know what I would ask for. Okay, start your sentence that way. I don't even know
Yes.
what to ask for. Here's what's going on. It's amazing what somebody who's not in the middle of it can see that you can't see.
Mm. Wow, that is powerful. I can see. Yeah, because your brain might just be all occupied in one area that you can't even get outside of that to see. Yeah, that's powerful.
Well, when we're stressed out, our brain, especially when there's an emotional component to it, our brain naturally just goes into reactive problem solving mode. We're not
Yes.
using our whole creative brain. And so we don't see all the solutions. Right? We're just, especially if it's something that is scary or anxiety provoking, we put blinders on, and there are evolutionary reasons that we're designed that way, right? It's like if you're being chased by a lion, you do not stop and notice the wildflowers. That's just that's not helpful. And so
Right.
that's again where compassion comes in, and just, okay, this is how I'm feeling. This is what's going on. Don't tell yourself that because you don't know how to solve the problem, or there's not a solution to the problem that you can see, there's no point in thinking about it. That's a trap we get into all the time.
Mm.
And then we use food to help us not think about it.
Yeah. So when transitioning to this kind of, let's just say, methodology to care for ourselves, to tune into ourselves, to show compassion for ourselves, what do you think is typical? I know that you can't always say it's going to take this long, or what do you think is the typical amount of time that it takes for this to kind of solidify for a person to train their minds to do this differently?
That is a great question. I think it's ever evolving and it's not gonna happen all at once. I think
Yeah.
you take it situation by situation. And again, our brains want to be all or nothing about this kind of stuff. But what can I do about the afternoons? I'm stress eating in the afternoons or evenings. How can I start to take a look at my evenings differently? That's when a lot of end of day stress eating happens, right? What can I start to do about that? And don't discount the power of your mind. I just had another conversation with a client who had a trouble spot at the end of the day. And what we ended up talking about was all the things she was telling herself needed to happen at the end of the day and how she was just stressing herself out in her mind around she didn't get everything done and now she's running out of time and now she's going to have to get dinner and like all just she was just amping herself up and she's just decided to shift how she's going to think about that a lot in many ways like we're talking about in this conversation today. And she came back a week later and she said, it just feels so different. I've been practicing this. What I'm doing with my time hasn't even changed. I thought it would. I haven't even changed it, but the way I'm talking to myself about it and feeling about it and the difference between being kind to myself versus driving myself at this time of day when I'm already so depleted has changed everything. You could just see the way she talked about it. And she said, I just feel so much lighter, that it feels
Yeah.
lighter. It doesn't feel like, oh no, it's 3 o'clock. It's the it's the bewitching hour, right? So we take it piece by piece, and those kind of changes can happen really quickly.
Agree. I agree. And I think I really want to emphasize that point for our listeners is that these kind of changes, can shift us very quickly, like very quickly. And I love what you said. It's not all or nothing. It's not about perfectionism. It's not like, oh my gosh, I'm just going to get rid of the stress altogether. That's not what we're saying, right? We're going to say, oh, I'm just going to connect with myself so I know how to, I don't know if you like the word manage, but be with myself so that I can experience myself and this a little bit differently. And it's like almost like an energy shift is what I was experiencing myself with reducing alcohol. I was expecting the alcohol to take care of all my emotional work, right? Just outsource my emotional work right to the alcohol. And if that meant the alcohol had to numb it, okay, great. At least that
Mhm.
thing, I don't have to feel it. But then it just made me like more fearful to feel it next time and more fearful. And it ingrained the habit mode and the behavior mode, just more so. It's like, oh, this is when I feel stressed. Oh, we're having a difficult conversation. Okay, we're just going to hit some wine because that's going to help me ease when I'm feeling rather than connecting with it, allowing it there so I can understand how to shift it energetically and be with it differently.
Yeah. Can I ask you, do we have time for one quick question about
Yeah.
that?
Yes.
Because I'm wondering if did there start to be a shorthand where you didn't even think, you just decided, I need the wine because it was this kind of day, or it's like I'm just going to need it because
I will say when I first started learning the mindset piece of this and connecting emotional, so mental and emotional, I don't want to just make it sound like it's all in the mind. I thought it was, a mindset thing. So it's always in the mind. And that would get me some success, but then I would just be on autopilot other times.
yeah.
I will tell you what the piece that really changed it was one time when I was working with my coach, it wasn't just a mental thinking thing, it was also an emotional thing. And then that emotions we store mostly in our body, not in our head. And so when I was like, oh, I've been just trying to fight this with a thinking thought, not the emotional piece. And it was not till I really connected with that emotional piece that I'm like, oh, this is a completely different energy shift and a completely different set of, I want to say, skills that I had to use to access that than the mental. And then that was like, oh, now I get it. And it was almost like you said, that light in your body, it's like a heavy weight you're carrying. You're kind of still struggling and then, relapsing sometimes or falling backwards sometimes, but other times knocking it out of the park. But when it was that emotional piece that lifted, then it was like, oh, I get how to do this. And then my drinking really cut down, like because I wasn't even having the battle. Like, I think so
Yes.
we keep it alive with the battle. Like, I shouldn't want it, but I do want it. And oh my gosh, I had it yesterday. Now my body is like craving it today because alcohol craves itself, so you're almost like doubling the craving when you have the back step or you misstep. And then it's like, oh, but the mental thing is just not working like it used to in the beginning of the week. It's harder now because I was missing the emotional connection piece.
Yes. And I hear so many people who are just, well, I need the cookie. I need the cookies, or I need the ice cream, or I need the chocolate. And can't, when you start to get behind it and see, wait a minute, there's a reason you need it. And there's so many better ways to take care of that need. Like so many more comprehensive ways, right, to address the need and the feelings and the thoughts but when your brain just does that shorthand of must have chocolate, we don't have you were just talking about how empowered you felt when you saw, oh,
Yes.
there's this and there's this and there's this. And so that is another reason why it's so powerful to stop and ask yourself, what do I know about what's going on? Because that's how you get your power back. Then you're like, oh, this is a problem.
Agree.
I can address this problem. It's not about how to not eat chocolate chips, right?
Right. Right. It's like I had access to another portal if
Yes. Yeah.
in like another
Love that.
dimension that I never had access to. I blocked my access for 10 years or more, on. And I'm like, oh, this is what they've been talking about on podcasts or in books, and I haven't been able to access it myself. But when you start accessing it yourself, now you're like, absolutely right. You reclaim your power. You're back in your power, and you're like connecting with yourself on a deeper level that is just really hard to explain until you experience it. Yeah. Love that. Love that. Yeah. Well, Melissa, it's been amazing having you on the podcast. Please tell my listeners where they could get this amazing quiz that you have on your website. Please send us there. And then any other ways that we can work with you or find you.
Well, I would love to connect with you if this stuff resonates. So my website is too much, too muchonherplate.com. If you go to toomuchonherplate.com/quiz, you can take the free quiz and you'll get results. But I think the most helpful piece is you'll get some resources that are simple, doable steps that you can start taking that are not going to add more stress to your life. My podcast is the Too Much on Her Plate podcast, and that's where I talk about this stuff every week. And I'm Too Much on Her Plate on Instagram and on Facebook. So super easy. Just one thing to remember.
Too much on her plate. I love it. Well, thank you, Melissa, for coming on the podcast again. And I can't wait to have you back a third time.
I love these conversations. Can't wait to come back. Okay.
Thanks for listening to the Health Habits and Epic Living podcast. If you're ready to take the next step to improve your health, wellness, and lifestyle goals, head over to www.epicyou.com and sign up for my weekly newsletter. Again, that's EPICYOU.com. Please note that the information in this podcast is for educational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice.